working in theatres and working in museums and theatres, mostly in marketing. And then after that, sorry, that distracted me, hang on, message. And then after that, I worked in consultancies. So I've worked in lots of the agencies across the country. So I worked in Audience Central, I worked in the East Midlands at Cultivate, and then I was part of the audience agency team that rolled out Audience Finder and Audience Spectrum in the Midlands a few years ago. So alongside all of that sort of work, I've been working as a consultant now since 2008, working with a range of organisations, primarily on marketing planning, strategic marketing and the use of data, and more recently doing digital strategy planning as well with a range of organisations. And I'm based in the Midlands myself. So it's I'm bringing all of that stuff to bear. Oh, the other thing that you might know me for is that I wrote a book for the AMA a few years ago called A Flat Pack Guide to Marketing the Arts. And that's because one of the things I've always done is work with really small organisations. I started my career in a tiny organisation where we had almost no resources and had to do sort of everything on a shoestring, and none of us were specialist marketers. So I like to try and do things which are really practical and tangible, rather than worrying about huge strategy or, you know, having something you can present to the board or something that looks really polished and shiny. I like to try and think about, well, what is actually going to be useful to you and what's going to work for us. So what are we going to cover today? So I'm going to start off by talking a bit about what marketing and audience development actually is, and specifically what it is in the context of cultural organisations, because marketing came from the practices that we do in terms of marketing come from commercial marketing practices, but being cultural organisations, we sort of adapted them for what we need, and so they sort of operate slightly differently to they might do in different sorts of organisations. So we'll look at that a little bit. Then we'll spend a little bit of time looking at digital engagement and the environment, and what is this online environment that we're talking about. And then we'll use a little bit of museum audiences data. We'll think about who it is we're trying to engage with, because it's a really important part of our marketing planning is to think in a detailed way about who we actually are trying to speak to. So that will probably all come before the break. That's my plan anyway. And then after the break, we'll start talking about what's different about marketing planning for digital than it might be for your other marketing planning. What's the same? How do we go about doing it? And we'll talk in a bit more detail about some of the channels there. And then there's a bit at the end, it's quite short, but we'll talk about monitoring and evaluation and how you might go about doing that. So hopefully by the time of today's session's over, you'll have quite a wide ranging and sort of will have covered some of those bases. So, but before we start with that, what I'd quite like to do is just get a bit of a sense from you all about what it is that you would like to get out of today's session, and really why you're here, I suppose, to some degree. So I'm just going to swap my screen a bit if I can work out how to do it. So I'm just going to stop sharing this for a minute. And we've got now you've probably already seen the link, but we've got a little mentee. So you go to the mentee and use the code. And my question to you is, what are your biggest challenges to being effective online? What is it that you're hoping to, I suppose, to some degree, what are you hoping to get out of today's session? So if you can just go to that link, either follow the link in the chat or go online and put in the code. I'm hoping that as you start typing your responses in to the question, we'll start seeing them popping up on the screen. Or not. Oh, yeah. So there's a lot here about impact. So that's the stuff we'll probably cover towards the end when we talk about monitoring and evaluation. And I think if that's something you're particularly interested in, we'll touch on it today, but some of the other sessions will also help you develop that some more. I'm really not surprised to see that time is sort of lurking at the middle of this cloud that's forming. I think that's going to be one of the things we really do cover today in terms of, obviously I can't do detailed time management with you individually, but I think one of the things about time is that we feel overwhelmed by what we could potentially be doing, and some of what we're going to cover today is how you decide what's appropriate for you. So hopefully that will start attracting some of that time issue. I guess capacity is also related to that. Hopefully by choosing what it is and when you do it, you'll be able to match it to the capacity of your organisations. I can see quite a lot about individual platforms like algorithms, Facebook, different platform type things. So that's something which I think we'll be able to look at in the bit after the break. I don't think we're going to cover, so I know that some people have got very detailed questions about particular platforms or particular techniques. You know, I've had some in advance questions, but also I know from running these sorts of sessions, people might want to answer questions about things like what's the best time of day to publish a tweet, for example. I'm not necessarily going to be able to answer all of those in detail, but if you do have those sort of questions and we haven't covered them in the section on the individual platforms, that's something you can pop into Jack in the chat, and we can maybe try and pick it up at the end in the Q&A, and I'll do my best to either answer it or at least point you in the direction of where you might be able to find an answer for that. And then I can see a few others which we will pick up on, some to do with knowledge in staff and teams, which I understand, and one of my key things today is going to be to show you that this is actually quite straightforward. So hopefully then some of those knowledge questions will be less important. And I think most of them sit in some of those areas actually. So Jack, I'm not sure how. I think I've probably got a way of saving this, but I'll try and save this image cloud so that we can have it afterwards, but it will be on there. So unless anybody else wants to throw anything else onto the image cloud now, that's been really helpful. And we'll, as I say, it'll be in the final report, and we might revisit it towards the end just to see if we've covered the things on there. I think the thing it shows as well is that you've all got quite similar issues, so that's good. Hopefully this series of sessions will really help you, because they are quite tailored to the stuff that you've mentioned. Right, I'm just going to share again with my Okay, is that okay, Jack? Just give me a thumbs up so you can see that. Yeah, great. Okay, so this is where we were before on the session. So now let's just move on and get started with the next section. So I'm just going to talk about what is marketing, and is it the same as audience development, because this is the term we use quite often, especially when we're working in the cultural sector. So one of the things that we sometimes think about marketing is that it is about the communications that we do. So it's about the information that we put out. So generally, the marketing department is responsible for, I know you don't all have marketing departments, but whoever's responsible for marketing is making the website and potentially producing leaflets and thinking about how people talk about your work externally. But actually, marketing is a bit more than that. Really, when you think about marketing, you should be thinking about that marketing is a planning process. It helps an organisation achieve its aims. So marketing is something which you need to plug in when you're thinking about the whole organisation's activity. So, for example, a curator is a really important part of the marketing activity of an organisation, because their knowledge of the work that they're putting together and the shows that they're developing and the objects that they've got to share is a really important part of that communication tool and toolkit. Also, I always think that, you know, we normally in the sector, we have such great things to share that if time wasn't an issue and resource wasn't an issue, you know, I could probably just, if I had an exhibition coming up, I could walk around the few streets near where I live, tell everybody about it one-to-one, and I could enthuse them so much they'd all come and I'd have a huge audience. But we just don't have that sort of time and resource to talk to everybody individually. So in lots of ways, marketing is just a management process for how we use the resource that we do have efficiently for the maximum amount of audience engagement. So that's why I say that we have to think about planning. How do we use that resource? And also, one of the other key things about marketing that I think is relevant, especially when we're thinking about this online marketing, is that it really develops a strong identity for the organisation and its public profile. So not everything that comes out of the marketing department is going to drive a visit or drive a sale or drive an engagement, but some of it is about that broader section of activity, which is about saying, hey, do you know we're here? This is what we do. We're really great at this. This is the resource. So when they see that people see the name of your organisation, they've already got a set of associations with it, so that they know exactly what it is that you do. So this slide describes what it is that I think marketing does. I use this slide, I teach quite a lot with students. Now, I find this, it's quite a simple idea, but it's really at the heart of the marketing planning process. And the idea is that, you know, you have you and your organisation, whatever that be, and you have your visitors, and you're trying to bring those two things together. And I like this simplification because actually, in some ways, all we're trying to do is create an environment where that handshake can happen. We're trying to create the circumstances where you and your audiences come together in a way that is mutually beneficial. So this is why, as marketers, often we are, or the people running the marketing operation, it's really helpful to think of yourself as being that link point between the organisation and the outside. And one of the reasons I find that a really useful idea is because we often think about marketing being the organisation pushing out, but actually in this circumstance with this slide, you can also imagine that it's also about your audiences feeding into you. So you're actually the pivot point between the audience or the visitors and the organisation, and you're going to feed those two things together. So really what I'm trying to say is that our marketing activity is trying to create the environment for this sort of interaction to happen, and our role as people running marketing, whether it be online or non-online, is to create those opportunities. And that's really what marketing is. I'm not sure you should say that to somebody who's doing a marketing degree. They may well disagree with me, but in terms of what we want to do, this is, I think, the easiest way to think about it. So the thing is about marketing is it's quite easy to imagine marketing when you're thinking about ticket sales, say, or selling activities or events. And that's the sort of commercial model marketing, which is mostly about generating income. But we're trying to do something much bigger than that usually. We're trying to think about marketing in a broader sense. And so we often use this term audience development as a more sort of cultural sector friendly sort of terminology. I mean, there are lots of ideas about what audience development actually is, but I quite like this simplification, this idea of using it as a sort of enhancement of the marketing model. So I like this box. If you imagine the little yellow box in the corner is the sort of existing audience, the people who are already coming, the visitors that we already have connections with. And what we want to do is grow it into that bigger box. And we have 3 dimensions on which we can grow it. The bottom one going across in the blue bubble is increase. We can just increase our audience. So we aim to get more people in, more visitors to each exhibition. We monitor how much footfall we get. We do activities which are designed to maybe get people in more often. So you might, for example, you're running a successful series of object workshops with children or young people or families. They're oversubscribed, so you run more of them, and that means you're increasing your audience. So that's quite a simple sort of activity. The other way we do it, if you look at the top sort of light, I don't even know what I call that colour, cream bubble, And this is really important to us normally in the sector, is about broadening and diversifying audiences. So we're not really, we have a real obligation to get more and different people in, and those obligations come from various sources. It might be our funding requires us to diversify the audience. It might be that there's something in us that we normally want to appeal to a broad range. For example, if we're a local authority funded, we particularly want to appeal to a broad range of our local inhabitants. For whatever reason, and here I'm using that term diversify audiences in a really broad sense, but what that means is to go along that axis, that sort of backwards, well, on the model axis, we have to be aware that we're not just getting more people who already engage with us in, we're looking at getting different people in. And so, for example, to do activity that's going to broaden our audience, we often have to change or develop the content we're offering to be more appropriate for different audiences. And I think we've seen that a lot in the last couple of years, particularly with people thinking about how to decolonize their collections or the way they present work, people wanting to put different voices, different cultures in the forefront. So we're thinking about broadening our audiences. And then the third one in the sort of, I don't know, wheat coloured bubble, I'll have to remember for next time to choose colours I can name, is I've called that deepen, and that's about getting closer to our audiences. And this is the one that we don't always think of as part of the marketing activity. But this is about really getting to know people better, getting to engage them more frequently, but more often, but more deeply. So the traditional model of what we are thinking about when we think about deepening is possibly you have people who attend or visit for one event. They might then come back and do a workshop with you, and then they might start volunteering, and then you get them on the board, and then they become fundraisers, so there's that sense that you can deepen and change the relationship that people have with you. But I think also this is about deepening the nature of the engagements and also the nature of the information that you're sharing with people, so that actually you're trying to encourage much more complex engagement with what you do. So audience development is about marketing. It's about changing the relationship between what it is that you do and who it is that you want to engage in order to reach your ambitions. But it recognises that we have a broad range of activities, a broad range of reasons why we want to engage people. So we're about more than numbers of visitors or sales. We want to achieve more than just people visiting. I think as cultural organisations, we're interested in the quality of every experience. So that's something that's part of the marketing organisation we often have to think about. How do we make sure that everybody who engages with us has a really good quality experience? We're driven by a range of motivators, including social aims. So that might be, wanting to enhance the community. Educational aims, try and really know what those are, and we might have a desire to make our community, I'm thinking here local community, more vibrant and cohesive. So we have a whole load of things that drive us which aren't just about income. And I think also, especially with museums, we've got responsibility to our collections and our objects, and we want to share that. We want to share our knowledge and our learning. We want to give space for objects to be seen and enjoyed. We want to have a space for objects to converse with each other and converse with the audiences. And so this marketing audience development effort is part of that process. I hope that's really clear. Obviously, if you've got questions about this part of the presentation, please do pop them in the chat. And I'll try and pick them up at the end, either at the end of the first half if I've got time, or if not, the end of the whole session. So that's a sort of quick overview of marketing and audience development. But what does that mean for online spaces? What does that, because online has opened up whole new spaces that enable us to market and talk to people in different ways. I think when we think about museums marketing online spaces, we often think about these sort of really high profile campaigns that have been really successful. The lockdown campaign has been fantastically successful. It's the Black Country Living Museum's TikToks. So obviously it's a living museum, and they've had people in character speaking, and they were sharing those on TikTok. And they have been extraordinarily successful, a sort of runaway success. And I can't remember the stats, but they were, you know, the most watched museum films last year, I think, or certainly in the period when they were releasing lots of them. This other one was probably, I mean, it's a few years old now, the Merle Absolute Unit Twitter campaign. Museum of English Oral Life published this photo, and it's just with a very simple, you know, look at this absolute unit, hashtagged it, and it went completely berserk. And actually, although it's a few years old, that hashtag is still running now. So so these are the campaigns that we think about. And I have worked with museums recently, and I know that part of the pressure that museums feel is that, you know, how do you replicate campaigns like these that are so successful? And part of my role here, I think, today is to say to you, you know, these were lucky, they're well produced, and they are the result of good social media practice, but I don't think either of these organisations predicted that they would be as successful as they were. So this is a very hard standard to hold yourself against, because your chances of being able to hit these sorts of levels of campaign, nothing to do with you or your skill or your collections or your stories, it's just very difficult, and it relates to circumstance and being, you know, at the right moment at the right time. For example, the Absolute Unit campaign, I understand that photo had been posted several times before it just took off like this, and it's really hard, you know, it was hard to pin down exactly what it was at that time made a difference. So these are what we think about, but actually really there's a sort of everyday grind to social media and online marketing that is actually probably more important for you to think about, and is more of an important part of your social media activity. So, for example, your online activity is really useful for just providing a central point for information. And I think we all understand that, but easy to access information sources, letting people know how to find you and what it is that you're offering. So there's an example from Museum of Barnstable in North Devon, and it's their Facebook page, and it just says some of the standard information that you need to share. So one of the most important things if you're doing online marketing is just to make sure that your information sources are really accurate and correct. We use social media for news, and this is something which obviously the information is a bit like print media. You know, actually in the old days we'd produce a brochure that had this information in, and now we have a website. News, social media and online gives us an opportunity to be a bit more fresh with our news, to release news in a more current way and get things out quickly. So we can talk about what's happening today and coming up. So you've got this one's from Instagram, and it's just a piece of news about a reopening of some activity. So it's a really good tool online to share this news and think about how we might keep people up to date. So these are the sort of everyday things. And then really the other thing we can think about is enhancement. How do we use the social media or online activities that we have to enhance our collections, objects, exhibitions and events? Where's the additional material? Because here's a really lovely example of something where you're just allowing people to talk a bit more about an activity, have a conversation with you, get a bit deeper into the collection. So there's real potential here for us to add another layer to our activity that we can promote through social media. And this always gives me to a question which, when I first work with, particularly with museums actually, about social media and online, is to think about what you're trying to achieve with your social media. Because one of the things that this does is it gives people the opportunity to engage with you without actually coming to your venue. And for some people that's great, and for other people that doesn't feel quite right, that social media is mostly meant to be pushing people towards in real life attendance. I mean, I guess we have to also bear in mind that there's not been much of that for the past 2 years, so also you know, things have changed. But what that means in practice in terms of when you're doing your marketing or planning is you have to decide if you're going to allow people to engage with you online in a way that doesn't require them also making a visit. How are you then going to value those engagements? Because one of the things I think museums struggle with sometimes is about saying, well, these engagements should be counted possibly as online visits rather than things like use of the website. You need, you know, there's a quality of the engagement that needs to be counted and recorded, and I think that, and that's something that you might want to think about, so that your organization is becoming a bit more porous and has outlets. You can almost see it as a virtual visit rather than an in-person visit, and then you should count it as such, so that you are keeping a record of when you have those interactions. But the point about this is it gives you've got a real opportunity to add depth to what it is that you do. So it's not all about those top flashy campaigns. A lot of it is about this everyday grind stuff of just the stuff that we need to do to keep our online ticking over. And just in terms of, sorry, we were talking at the start about, lots of you talked about time and resource management. Managing this and planning for this and allowing your time to be used on this is much more productive than trying to create something that is going to be than trying to create something really flash, because this is actually the meat and drink of what it is that we need to do. And so just continuing that idea about enhancements, just thinking about what online allows us to do differently possibly than normal marketing. It really allows us to build community in a way that is very difficult if we don't have social media. Of course, we're all used to social media now, but it allows us to develop conversations in the public space, provides forum for discussion, and makes your organisation more two-way. So you need to, your visitors are able to talk to you in a way that they probably weren't able to before. You know, they'd be putting their customer comment cards in saying lovely exhibition, whereas now you can publish a photo of sunset in your wherever it is and invite other people to submit their own photos of that sunset in that locality. And so you've immediately created a two-way interaction that might not have been there before. And so when you're doing your marketing planning, your online planning, thinking about this community and how you're going to manage it is a really important part of what you do. So, for example, Facebook groups where you can host events or you can share information to quite a small group of people are really effective. Or Instagram, where you can share audiences to participate online in visual projects, such as photos under a shared hashtag. And I've seen people do that really well. So we'll talk about these platforms a bit more in the second half. But one of the things that, just building on what I'm saying here, is that the, for example, Facebook group it seems to be a really effective format for people who are quite highly engaged with you as an organisation and want to have a conversation. So they can be a really powerful tool. One of the things I'm going to say to you throughout this is that you do not need all of these platforms. You don't need to use every single platform we're going to talk about today. You need to choose the ones that are most effective for you. But I've seen a Facebook group or a Facebook page be a really effective way of sort of building a small community of your most loyal attenders that runs a sort of alongside your other social media activity and allows you to have a profile on Facebook. So that's something to think about. Instagram is a more dynamic platform. You can ask audiences to participate online through images, and people like sharing images, so it can be a really good way of doing it, but you have a bit less control over what people are sharing, what you're sharing. So when you're in the Instagram space, you have to be aware that you're in a much more fluid space, and you're sort of participating as an equal to the audiences that you're engaging with, as opposed to sort of feeling like an institution engaging with a set of visitors. Which is a really fantastic place to be in, because it does enable really vibrant conversations. But I don't, Instagram can be quite hungry in terms of the amount of time you need to push things out through it. So I would say you don't necessarily need an Instagram page unless you're prepared to publish images on a fairly regular basis. And so these online facilities also allow you to build your brand in your community, so that you and your community sort of become part of the same identity. So what I mean by that is that all of these forums, because they give spaces for your community to comment or ask questions or make or to share things, you're giving space for their voice that's going to be associated with your brand, and that enables you to build a really strong community. And it enables you to become your advocates, possibly develop their own online projects. So, for example, the Facebook group, one of the reasons I think that can be really effective is because that means that when people, maybe other people, are searching on Facebook for something, it's often your community who might say, you know, it might be, I don't know, a parent saying, oh, anybody know anything to do with the kids this weekend? And one of your users will tag you in and say, oh, did you know that such and such museum is doing these great activities? And they'll point them towards your Facebook group. So it's helping your community become your advocates if you can be present on that platform. So we'll talk about more about the individual platforms in the second half of the session. But what I want to talk about a little bit more now is about museum audiences and what we know about them. Because if you think back to that initial slide where we had the handshake, we're talking about you as an organisation and your audiences or your visitors that you want to engage with. And key to that in terms of marketing is that we use information and knowledge about our audiences to feed and develop those plans. So you might hear the phrase evidence-led decision-making in the marketing context. And what we mean by that is that when we talk about audiences, we try where we can, or visitors, to use real life data about who they are, so that we're not just working on the basis of our observation of our audience, but we're actually working on knowledge about who it is that attends events. So, understanding our audiences and why they engage with us is what we're going to look at now. And there's information available to you to do that. So this is basically the handshake slide, but just in a slightly different format to allow you to think about it in a different way. Here are the organisations, they're the producers of something that people want. And on the other side, you've got, of the Venn diagram, you've got visitors, people with a whole range of interests, wants and needs. So people need somewhere to take grandma for a day out. They've got a school project they need to do some research for. They've found themselves in the town centre and it's raining and they need somewhere to hide from the rain, or they need somewhere for a meeting with a client. So people need lots and lots of different things, and you produce the things that they need. And in the centre of that Venn diagram is the condition where the two can come together. So you have just that morning on your Instagram page put out a lovely little video. That's not the word, video, little tiny vignette of a beautiful cup of coffee and a shot of, you know, a menu. This is how, you know, we're doing specials on soup and a roll today. That's gone out on your Instagram, and people who found themselves in town, need somewhere for lunch, are going to come along. So it's creating that opportunity for people to match up what it is they're looking for with what it is that you've got to offer. So we normally understand the organisation side really quite well because that's us and we understand what it is our offer is. But what we need to really understand is the visitor side. Who is it that of the people that might come? Now, there's plenty of research available. You'll do your own research more likely, but also there's sort of generic research about museums audiences, which we're going to have a quick look at. This was a report done by the Audience Agency in 2018. So they've taken data from a range of museums and looked at it and written a report about it, which I recommend you look at if you haven't already, because it really does give you lots of information about people who come to museums. But there's lots of good news in this report for you as museums. So what do we know about audiences? We know that families love museums. So the Audience Agency have compared this data, they use this data, they also collect data from arts organisations and a range of cultural organisations, and they're comparing the data for the museums across that spectrum of data that they've gathered. So that's why they use the terminology art forms here. Families love museums, so museums attract a higher proportion of family visitors than any other of the art forms they look at. So that would be music, theatre, you know, carnival even. So we all know that families love museums, but it's there in the data. The other good news is that your regular customers are frequent visitors. So regular museum goers visit the same museum 3 times a year on average, which is really good news. And you'll probably be able to look at some of your own customer data and see how often they come. It might be that 3 times doesn't sound like a lot to you, but in terms of the data, for somebody to come 3 times a year, it's really great. So that gives you opportunities as museums to build on that, to know that people want to come time and time again. They're happy to come, whether that be because they want to come and see a new exhibition, or whether they just like coming to see the same objects again, whether they're doing workshops or other engagements. But you've got potential in your organisations to drive people to come again and again and again, and that's really good news. Museums, I mean, of course, this data is fairly general because it looks at the whole spectrum of museums, but they have a broad appeal, really broad range of visitors of all ages. So you've got that, so you know that you are going to get this broad set of organised visitors, and that you can develop programmes and projects and activities to appeal to a broad range of visitors. And the other good news, and I think this is, and it's expected, but it's good to know, is that, and don't forget there are London museums in this data set as well. So for you, the figures might be different if you're not working in this sort of large museum, but working in more of a local museum. 52% of visitors live within a 30-minute drive of the museum. So museums really play an important part in their local community. So really appreciated and used by people in their location. So and that is just a very small extract from some of the other data that you can find in that report. Of course, the report identifies challenges as well. So engaging people with disabilities is a challenge for museums still. The report shows that 10% of visitors identify as having some degree of limiting disability, compared with 18% of the population as a whole. So there's still some work to be done there in terms of engaging people with a range of disabilities. Don't quite understand how the generating repeat visits fits with the frequency one, but I think it just means that we can probably push up the number of people who do make those repeat visits, and that's going to increase your audience as a whole. There seems to be an issue about advocacy, according to this data, in that museum audiences are less likely than audiences from other art forms to recommend the experience to others. I think that could be a little bit of taking for granted what's on your doorstep. So people assume that other people know that you're there and therefore don't represent them or reflect them. But actually getting your visitors to work as advocates could be a really powerful thing to do. And that's one of the areas where social media, if you think about the example I just used earlier from Facebook, could really help. So that advocacy is something that you might want to think about. And then we've got an issue about museum audiences, for everything that we've said, tend to be from better educated and more affluent homes. And I've taken this terminology directly from the audience agency because I thought it was interesting the way they've said it. They've said lifetime strategies for engaging young people who are not necessarily their parents in waiting would be something to work on. I think what the audience agency are reflecting is that actually communities are changing really fast at the moment, and that whereas maybe in previous generations young people maybe follow the patterns of activity of their parents, changes in society recently mean that actually young people often are taking quite different paths to their parents, and that potentially stacks up a problem for museums in that, you know, you may end up with a little gap in terms of the audiences. So thinking long term now about how to get younger people involved in museums and create a lifetime of engagement might be worth doing. So those are some of the audience challenges that the museum sector and maybe individual museums might want to think about addressing some of their activity. Now, what they also identified though was this set of core, what they call the core four. These are the biggest audience groups for the museum sector, and they may or they may not be your audience groups, but just to go through them so we have an idea of the sorts of people who are using museums as a whole. So they talk about young creatives, 16 to 24-year-old independent young adults and thinkers who want to learn, create and curate their experience. So this is a big group in the analysis that the audience agency have done, and a really interesting group, I think, especially when we're thinking about that last slide about trying to create patterns of attendance that go on. But I think what this group is showing us is that maybe these people are thinking differently about the way they use museums than their parents might have done. So there's a real opportunity with this group to create a lifelong engagement with the museum sector. I think families is something that we are really aware of. Visitors attending museums with children wanting to be entertained and educated together. And when we think about families in this sort of context, we're thinking about that really broad spectrum of what a family might be. I mean, I think in its basic analysis, we're talking about one adult attending with one child. And, you know, because this could be grandparents doing childcare and wanting something to do. This could be an extended family. This could be the sort of thing that you know, a family with multiple parts might come together and do together as a way of learning. It could be families with older children, you know, engaging with their children because they can do something that matches their education and learning. So families in the broadest sense, I just do that bit of description because I mean, I've done a lovely picture of a small child doing some activity, which tends to be what we think of when we think of families, but actually families is a much broader group of people. They've called this group, the next group, older learners. So museum visitors aged 55 plus who want to be active, social and connected. So it's absolutely clear that as museums, you offer opportunities for these older learners to engage with you. But the thing that I think is really interesting in this section is that they want to be active, social and connected. What can you do as museums to connect people rather than just welcoming them and providing things for them to look at? Is there something you can do to connect them? And then they've got this group called cultural tourists, which are affluent adults who are cultural enthusiasts who will travel more than 60 minutes for specific experiences. They're one of the big four in terms of the audience agency analysis. They may or may not be appropriate or relevant to your museum. I think it's going to really change from museum to museum how much you actually are a destination for cultural tourists. So I'm going to ask you in a minute to think about your own audiences, because I know that this call for won't be your call for necessarily. But I'm showing you that so that you partly understand. Excuse me a second, just leave it there. I'm sitting in my front window and somebody's trying to deliver a box. you may need to, yours may be different, but you will probably be identify key segments of people who attend into your organisation. So I'm not going to speak hugely about segmentation now, because I know that there's another seminar on it, so I don't want to talk about it too much. However, the audience spectrum segmentation produced by the audience agency is a really useful tool for looking at audiences, and they separate the cultural audience into 10 different segments. Those top 3, which are orange, are segments that tend to be very culturally engaged. The middle 3, the green ones, are ones who will do cultural activity when it suits them, when it fits into their life. And the bottom 4 are people who are groups who only do cultural activity very rarely and may need some special steps to help them to engage with what it is that you want to do. So I'm just pointing you towards that. I suggest you go and look at the online, you go to the online segmentation session, because it's a really useful way of trying to understand and identify your audiences. So what I'm suggesting that you would do as a museum is to identify some broad target groups within your museum attendance that you can talk to directly. So you might think families as a group, you might think older people as a group, but the more specific you can make those groups, the easier it is for you to target your communications at them and the channels that you use. And it's really useful, I think, to go away already having thought about your groups a little bit. So I'm just going to stop this share now, and I'm going to, I think, move back onto this one. No, I'm going to stop that one in a second. Just bear with me while I pull it up. Okay, so I'm going to share again. So now is the same mentee as you went to before, and it'd be just interesting to get a sense of what you know about your audiences. So just how would you describe your audiences? What sorts of things would you describe for them? And we will maybe pick up on this when we talk about the channels in the next section. Yeah, local history enthusiasts, that's really common with the smaller local museums particularly, and it's a really fantastic tool for social media is conversations about local history, because you've got some really brilliant images and pieces that you can bring together. So somebody's talking about a rural audience. Again, social media and online, that's great because you've definitely got ways of engaging people who can't always come into the organisation. So when you are creating particularly activities for them that they might want to do online, you need to think about how you're going to value those engagements, because they are in effect instead of an in-person engagement. Opinionated, yes, audiences are always opinionated. See quite a lot of older stuff coming through. Families, somebody's mentioning Facebook families, which is one of the audience spectrum segments. But just say, from my experience of using audience spectrum, we have a segment called Facebook families, which are quite hard to engage group, quite younger, often younger families, younger parents as well as younger families in busy jobs, who do activities. They're called Facebook families because they engage a lot through social media. The thing is, sometimes people mistake Facebook families as being where all the families in the spectrum segmentation are located. whereas actually all of these segments that you can see that I showed you have families involved in them. They're not just the Facebook families. So if you're interested in family audiences, you're probably engaging with people from across the spectrum. See railway buffs, dog walkers, see some cultural tourists, but lots of older audiences. Some people saying they want to engage fugitives from the rain. Yeah. Somebody talking about people who are transient going on university courses. So that's a younger audience. And then some people are talking about their international audiences. And I think that's really interesting because there's definitely scope for you to open that up with your international audiences using social media. Great. I mean, you can continue to add to that if you've got more to, but obviously we can save that and we can refer to it a bit as we go through the next part of the section. I think I'm going to break now for our 10-minute break. I'm going to start off by showing a little video anyway, so hopefully as people come back in, this will be the video on. So in this section, we're going to think about planning our digital marketing activity, but just while people come back on, I'm just going to show this little video clip. Oh, I probably stopped. Jack, could you hear that?
It was quite faint. I wonder if you want to perhaps stop sharing and then do the reshare and make sure that that little audio box, yeah.
Definitely forgot to do that.
I'm trying to see every piece of art in London in one day. Wow. What's the fastest anyone's ever gotten through the museum?
I don't know. We don't keep the record.
Because I'm going to beat it. Is running allowed here? Silly walking?
Maybe silly walking.
Okay, thanks. All right, it's 6 p.m. Everything is officially closed, but we called ahead, pulled some strings, and the National Gallery is going to let us in after hours. Should be pretty cool. Wow. A very wise man, Ferris Bueller, once said, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it." I'm trying to see every piece of art.
So, I mean, that was a video. I wanted to show it to you just because, partly because it's nice, I think, at the start when people come back in, but it helps this model that we're going to talk about now, which is called Hero Hub Hygiene. So, when we are using our social media, we have to plan what it is that we're going to share. And we've talked already about how there are some high profile projects that we've seen. But actually, that's not all that social media and online is about. This is a content marketing model devised by Google for YouTube, really, for people publishing material on YouTube. But actually, we quite often adapt it to thinking about social media and online for everything that we do. The video that we just saw could be described as hero content. So big splash campaign designed to spread brand awareness more than individual visits and to increase engagement in general. So hero content is expensive, it's flashy, it has the potential for viral sometimes. You would not expect to do very many hero content campaigns in your annual cycle. You may only do one or two of things that are designed to be this sort of high profile. That's quite expensive often, creating hero content. So that's sort of the pinnacle of that triangle. The middle bit is, if you think back to what we were saying earlier in the first half, this is the sort of topical and shareable content that connects you with your audiences and visitors, what motivates them, what gets them engaged. So this is the bit where you're having conversations with people. This is the bit where you're tempting them with really interesting content. This is the bit where you're creating conversations online. This is the sort of fun bit of social media, really, but it can be quite time consuming. And then at the bottom, the stuff that really underpins the triangle, if you like, is what they call the hygiene content. I'm sure there must be a better word beginning with H to describe this content, but anyway, it's the functional content that forms the foundation of your digital communications. But it's really important to get that bit right, because at the end of the day, if you're creating shareable media and really lovely bits of stuff, and then people come back to your website and they can't find out what your opening hours are, then you've really lost an opportunity. So the hygiene stuff is the stuff you really do need to focus on, and make sure that whichever channels you choose to do, you've got sufficient information and that's robust. So, I mean, like all of these models, this isn't something that I'd say, you know, you have to think about in great depth necessarily. It's a tool for thinking and planning your social media and online content, and to recognize that, you know, an important part of what you do will be that standard day-to-day stuff. So here's some more examples just to give you a sense of how museums operate in these sorts of spaces. So hero content is often created specifically for social media. You particularly want to have people interacting with it and talking about it. You aim to create a viral interest. You can't guarantee that's going to happen, but you aim to do it. It's often funny and highly engaging. And there's not usually a brand, a sales message. These things are really expensive often though. So there's this might be something you invest in as you develop a program or an exhibition. You might invest in creating some really high quality hero content. So these two examples that I've given you here, and these examples, I mean, these are from very big museums with big budgets, but you know, I want to give you some examples to give you ideas of things you might want to do. So the Met Museum set up this so that players of Animal Crossing, which is a kids video game, can actually put artworks into their virtual homes. So that's a really lovely quality piece of activity. And the other one there, the Royal Ontario Museum put one of their T-Rexes on Tinder and tried to generate dates for it. So, you know, really fun sort of content. I mean, that's what's great about social media as well. You can be so playful with it. Here's sort of more hub-based activity. So the hub stuff is where you're pushing out regular content. You're targeting messaging using your channels to identify and reach specific customers. So we know that different channels have got different customer bases, which I'll come on to in a minute. So you're putting the right information on the right channels. And it's a space for interactivity, so you can include conversation, competitions, and you can also include complexity. You can actually you know, allow several layers of conversation. This content can be fairly cheap because you're usually building on the skills of your staff teams, for example. I watched a lovely little video the other day about a flea circus created by a museum, because my daughter was reading a book which mentioned a flea circus and we both couldn't quite believe what it was. So we went and found some content. There was a museum curator actually showing how a flea circus worked. So it's that sort of, you're using what you've got in-house, but bringing it to life for the audience. So in some ways that content can be fairly cheap because you're using the resources that you've got. But where you will invest is if you're putting this sort of content out there and you've worked on creating it, then it's really important to make sure that you're monitoring these channels and responding to people, because if you're generating responses, you need to be part of that conversation. So planning for your own time to support the hub content is really important. And so here's a project from the Foundling Museum where they encourage people to create a new story by adding writing and illustration into an evolving story. So lots of ways to get involved there. And then here's the hygiene content, just to give you a bit more information about that. I mean, I think it's fairly self-explanatory what we're talking about here, but this is the information that your people will search for. So you can think about Hub as being the stuff that you're pushing out, that's creating as new work to go out. Hygiene is where people will sort of saying, I mean, I do this all the time, what are the opening hours for example? So people are actually searching for you. So it's less tailored to individuals, whereas the Hub stuff, you can put that Foundling Museum project was going out on Instagram to a target audience. You might put something completely different out on Twitter. But the hygiene content is pretty standard. You want this content to be easily found by search engines. And being standardized is what helps people find what they need. So you will all notice that on websites, you know, we have this fairly standard set of, you know, an about page, a contact page, and what's, you know, there is a standardized content, and that's not a bad thing. That helps people find what it is that they need to know. This is my local museum, Sayre Mill, and this is just a really nice page, you know, on their thing that tells you about their opening times, entry, and has a lovely picture about the organisation. So when you're planning your social media and online activity, thinking about it from the bottom up might be a really good place to start. What's our hygiene? Is it fit for purpose? Is it doing what we need it to do? How often will we revise that and revisit it in the course of a year, for example, could be part of your marketing planning. And then once you know that's right, you can start thinking about, okay, we've got individual activities coming up, or events or shows that we could do something really interesting with. Let's think about one piece of really interesting interactive Hub content for each of those, for the target audiences that we want to engage. And then, do we want to do something flashy this year? Do we want to do something big? Do we want to push something out that's going to make people laugh, that's just for the fun of it, really, that we're not necessarily promoting an event or an activity? So I'm going to run through the channels briefly now, and I will share with you what I think of from my experience that's relevant. You may have additional questions, and that's something that we will pick up with at the end if we can. So here's some demographics for you, just so you've got an idea. This is Facebook. It's got 2.7 billion users every month, so absolutely massive amount of people using Facebook. The largest age group is 25 to 34s. That was the last piece of data that I could find. But even that only makes up a quarter of the platform. But it's certainly not predominantly a young person's platform. It's a sort of a more mature, digitally mature audience using this platform. The gender split on Facebook I thought was quite interesting, with 44% female and 56% male, because that's not usually in arts and cultural organisations. We have more women than men booking, so this could be a channel to get through to a slightly larger male audience. And people spend about 38 minutes per day on Facebook, so they tend to use it quite for a long amount of time. Of course, the problem with social media is, and these sorts of statistics, is they change all the time. So you know, this won't stay the same. One of the trends that we've noticed over Facebook, certainly over the last few years, is it has moved away from people still post personal information and updates, but a lot of people use it solely for groups these days. So they're going on for their local selling groups, either Facebook Marketplace or a community group. They might have a local history group or something they work with on Facebook. So there are a lot of people, or they might be finding out information, like we mentioned earlier, about when you're open and what you've got happening, or using it as a direct forum to ask you questions. So there are a lot of people who sit on Facebook who don't necessarily post very often. So they're not necessarily very frequent posters, but they are frequent users. So what would you use Facebook for? Well, it's a really good place to put hygiene or information centre in a group or a page, and then that's a really quite a simple thing to monitor. You can set it up so that you get notifications if people post in that group or ask questions, and so it can be a very nice little additional centralized forum for you as a way of having interaction with people, but you're actually mostly just providing with standardized information. People who like your Facebook group or participate in your Facebook activity are likely to be your core audience. So likely to be people who come to you time and time again. So not necessarily the best forum for growing or broadening or diversifying your audience, but can be a really good way of strengthening that relationship you do have with the people who like you the most and come to you most often. And that means it's really good for providing news and quick updates, and for encouraging your community to work for you. You can often just ask them to share information with their friends using that forum, for example. And it's an opportunity for sharing, liking and commenting. So I don't think you necessarily have to have a Facebook group or a presence, but I think do I think that? I think you probably need a Facebook group or presence of some sort, because people do sometimes search on Facebook as instead of a Google search for information. But it can be quite light touch in the amount of support you give that group. You can use it as much as you need. Twitter's a really interesting channel. I guess if we were all in the same room and we had more time, I'd ask you how many of you use Twitter, but it's a really active channel, but it has obviously fewer users than Facebook. That said, I mean, these are global figures, so how much that really matters it is moot, really. Again, a slightly larger, slightly older age group. So this is 30 to 49. So a sort of older group of people, but again, not your sort of more elderly attenders who have popped up when you talked about your own audiences. My observation, but it's not really based on data, so I'll hand this out to you as a possibility, is that people tend to use it a lot for work-based conversations, so or professional conversations. But you know, obviously they also have news and you can see what's trending. Again, it's got a high percentage of male to female, so another way of growing that audience. And people tend to spend about 3.5 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes there at a time. So they're making very small visits to Twitter. So as you know, on Twitter, the posts are quite short, but you need to really grab their attention. And to do that, you are going to have to make sure that you follow lots of people and encourage lots of people to follow you, because then when you make a post, it will go wider than if you just make a post but you don't have a big group of followers. So working on your Twitter follows and followers is an important thing to do if you want to have a Twitter presence. Again, I would suggest you probably do need a Twitter page and login, even if you don't tend to use it that much, just to provide a central point to point people towards your website and your other resources. But you can use it to keep audiences up to date if you've got news that needs to go out. It can be really good fun for these shared conversations, like Ask a Curator. So people operate under a hashtag on the same day and people put in questions and you can respond. There are quite a few of those sorts of things in the calendar. Ask a Curator. There was a Curator Wars one for a bit, which was quite good fun. Participating in conversations under a hashtag can be a really nice way to use Twitter. And it might just be that it happens on one day or over a couple of days. So something that you can participate in that's quite light touch. I think it's a really nice way to bring your collection to life. If you do have an active Twitter handle and you do use it, putting regular images up and just talking about the objects that you want to share and have come up, it's just a really lovely way to share those and be part of the conversation. So, but make sure that when you do share it, you put plenty of hashtags, and also one of the things that I think is really helpful on Twitter is to use the list function to build a list of your partners. And whenever I'm working on Twitter, if I've got something I want people to share, I just direct message all my partners and say, oh, look, I've just done this really important tweet. Could you share and comment on it? So it's not enough just to put the tweet out there. Usually you have to support it by asking people either on the tweet or behind the scenes to be part of that tweet and to share it and to spread it wider. But then it can be really good fun. With Twitter, obviously we have to be really careful about what we say. I think it happens less now, but I would always advise against getting into sort of negative Twitter conversations, but I'd also advise usually against deleting or trying to remove tweets. You know, if you just try and keep your channel nice and busy, then hopefully anything which is negative just gets pushed down the list. So either respond to it in a positive way or push it down the list, but try not to get into an argument about it. Instagram is a really lively channel at the moment. They are changing the way they want to do things, and so they're going to have more video content. At the moment, Instagram is mostly images that people share, but they're moving towards more video content. I would say Instagram, if you're not familiar with it, is quite a difficult channel to come to terms with because it actually has quite a lot of different functionality. You've got the images and the streams, but they also do reels and little videos as well as stories. And I'm not even, you know, I'm really struggling sometimes to keep on top because they keep on changing the different things that they do. But if you think of it as being image-based, you don't have much control over the conversation after that, but you can have, so you sort of put things out there and it might get liked and shared, but you don't have much control over what happens next. But it's a really lovely channel to get people to share their images as well. So that's where you can do a really great, I don't know, what things I think work on Instagram are, you know, what is this? Maybe a photo of something quite bizarre or part of an image and see if people can think out what it is. Or photography competitions work really well on Instagram. So it's got a massive number of users. It's got 1 billion users. It's slightly younger, going back towards that sort of Facebook group. It's more female than male, so it's a different sort of gender breakdown. And people do spend quite a bit of time, maybe half an hour a day if they use Instagram. A lot of small businesses are finding that Instagram is a really useful channel for them because they can share their photos of the things that they're selling. So it's a really it's quite a warm community as well, Instagram. So it's a great place to share visual content. It's a great place to value your audience's own creativity, insight and knowledge. So you can ask for their advice, you can ask for their ideas, you can ask them to share their creativity and develop therefore interactivity behind it. What I've also seen on Instagram that works really well is behind the scenes. So, you know, a curator at work or restoration at work, that sort of thing can work really well. And it's a really good fun channel to have. Out of the channels we've discussed so far, I'd say you probably don't have to have an Instagram channel because I think lots of museums get by without it. But if you've got a bit more time and resource to use, then it can be a really lovely way of engaging people. I don't know how many of you use LinkedIn, but it's, I think, a really useful channel. It's a professional audience. So LinkedIn is about connecting professionals. Massive amount of users worldwide. So if you're interested in international audiences or you've got international projects, it can be an interesting way of engaging with them. It's an older group, and that's one of the reasons why I think it can be useful, because it can get through to professional people usually, but maybe slightly older. And people don't access it necessarily as frequently. They may be accessing it weekly or monthly rather than daily, but it's a really great place to take maybe a more professional view. So if you're offering room hire, for example, that could be a really good place to promote the room hire, because you're going through to people who are looking to put on conferences and stuff. business news. It can be a really good place to be part of a conversation with your peers. And if you remember, one of the things we spoke about towards the start is that it's really good to use social media to develop your brand. And so this could be a good way of developing your brand and to connect with other professionals. So again, you might not have an active LinkedIn channel, you may, but it's useful in a really different way to the other channels we've discussed. So it's definitely worth thinking about. Just going to talk really briefly about your website in this context. So what are you doing your website? What are you using your website for? Provide reliable and up-to-date information. It needs to be, I would always have my website as the single definitive place for information, even if you have these other channels operating. But make sure your social channels are linked into your website, or people know how to find you on social on the website. It's a really good place to invite people to join your e-marketing list and to generate sales. When you're developing, obviously I've only got a tiny amount of time, can't really talk hugely about website development, but from working with a few smaller organizations recently, these are the key things that I would think about when I'm developing my website in terms of online marketing. Firstly, ensure your website is easy to navigate. The navigation is the most important part. It's more important than the bells and whistles. So make sure it's easy to navigate and that people can find their way through to the relevant areas with the minimum number of clicks. When we do online marketing, you often hear the term SEO, which stands for search engine optimization, which just means, is your website easy for Google, for people searching to find? So basically we're talking about Google. Will Google find your website easily? You need to search for your own website and just see if it comes up top of the list. But this is something that your web developer, whoever it is, can help you with. There are things that the web developer can do to make sure that your website is top of the list and is optimized for SEO. So just make sure that you ask your developer to do that. I would say, as for most people, this feels really frightening. And that's why I'm saying, I don't think you need to do it. You just need to ask them to do it for you. And you also need to ask your developer to make sure that your analytics is set up properly. Google Analytics is the tool that most people use, which is a really useful, you just go to the website and it will show you all your analytics. You go to the Google Analytics website and it will show you how your website's performing. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a couple of minutes. But there are ways of connecting your social feeds into your Google Analytics so that you can see how the two things are working together. And I cannot for the life of me remember what the word is. It's just slipped my mind. But basically, you can ask your developer to take a little token from Facebook and put it into your Google Analytics, and it will see how your Facebook and your Google are talking to each other. So this is all stuff which sounds really complicated, but your website developer should be able to do that for you really easily. And then finally, I just want to talk briefly about e-commerce. So e-coms or e-communications, e-marketing. As you can see, I can't quite decide which name to use. I've used all different ones. But this is, how do you communicate with people through e-marketing? And this is connected. Obviously, we've talked a lot today about social media and using these different social media channels, but actually having a really robust e-marketing list and using that regularly to communicate with audiences and visitors is a really crucial part of your social strategy. So you maybe, if you have a box office system, you might be able to use that to manage your e-commerce. So you might be able to gather people's names and addresses and email addresses and spool them emails, marketing emails directly through your box office. I don't think many people do that. I think most people use services like MailChimp, which is an online service that you can use. Either it's free to a certain level, to about 2,000 addresses, and after that you have to pay. But the beauty of something like MailChimp is that you put your e-marketing list in there. It helps you create beautifully formatted emails. So when it has like a drop and drag system where you can put different sorts of content blocks. So you can do a block with a photo and some text, or you can do a button to push people to a certain part of your website. It helps you make those emails with just a drag and drop system. And also within MailChimp, you have a set of analytics. So you can go in after your campaign's gone out and you can see how many people have opened your message, which links they followed from your message. So you can monitor your messages really easy from MailChimp. MailChimp will also then manage that e-marketing list. So ones that have come back as bounce backs, it will just delete off your list for you. So it keeps your list moderately clean. So a service like MailChimp is a really easy way to do your e-marketing. So why do you do e-marketing? Well, in the old days, those of you like me who are old enough to remember, we used to send out letters on frequent basis to people with either a brochure or a flyer for an activity. And that was one of the main ways we communicated with people to encourage them to attend our events or activities. Now, by and large, we do that through email, which is cheaper and environmentally friendly, more environmentally friendly, and just much easier and quicker. Some of you, I noticed, have, we know that you've mentioned your audiences are older, but actually even older audiences are often very open to e-marketing these days. I work in the theatre world where we're quite reliant on brochures. We tend now to send the brochure out a couple of times a year still, because some people, especially those older audiences, like that physical thing in their hand they can put on top of the fridge and look at. But the majority of direct mail has now moved to e-marketing. One of the other beauties about e-marketing is we can send really targeted messages. So if you create a list online, or you have a marketing list, you can segment it, so you can send a different message to your family attenders or to your older attenders. And you can do all of that through a service like MailChimp. So that means, because also each iteration, each e-marketing piece that we send out is quite cheap, it means that we can do it more frequently should we want to. So you can use it both to keep people in the loop with news, but you can also do it to drive sales or attendance, or to send targeted messages to encourage people to try something new. Or if you've got a really nice, a nice set of people on your list who you know intend to engage with you quite often, you can move people up that ladder of engagement. So maybe they were a visitor, you encourage them to volunteer, you're encouraging them to donate. I've also just referred very briefly here to a tool like SurveyMonkey, or I think SurveyMonkey might be changing its name. There are several surveying tools out there online that allow you to do audience surveys quite quickly and easily. So in the old days, we always used to have to take paper surveys and get people to fill them in. That's still actually a really great way of doing surveys. But you've got online tools now to allow you to survey your audiences. And the advantage of using those is that you can send out a link so that people can do it in their own home, or you can get them to do it if you've got iPads in the venue when they're there. But the big advantage is something like SurveyMonkey is that after they've completed the survey, the online system will provide you with the reports and the pie charts and the graphs that you need. So that's all done for you as part of the survey. Some of them will be free for quite small surveys as well. So it's quite an effective way of talking to your audiences. So finally, I'm going to try and bring this all together with this "it's all in the plan" slide. I've tried to show you, we know the opportunity is huge, but we need to choose which channels to focus on. So if you really want to engage younger audiences using that demographic information, you might say, well, let's really do an Instagram project, for example, or which was the, well, I mean, obviously I haven't gone through all the channels, and we have TikTok and Snapchat, the other one, Snapchat. Which appeal to even younger audiences. So you need to choose the channels that work for you. You need to understand, so it's okay, I'm going to just talk around this slide rather than do it individually. The real message that I want to share with you today is it's okay not to do it all. You don't have to do everything. If you can get that hygiene hub stuff right first, Then think about, well, can we do 1 or 2 interesting projects which might fit into the sort of hub style of things where we're encouraging interactivity? And then maybe do something more hero-y when we've got some energy and some funds, and we can maybe bundle it into a project proposal to get some special funds to do a really lovely video or funny project connected to our piece of work. You have to plan it and decide what you're going to do, and it's absolutely okay not to do it all. Develop a plan that works for you. Be inspired by others, but don't feel like you have to do the same. I mean, we've seen even today in this couple of hours some really lovely projects. You just can't do it all, and you shouldn't feel like you need to. I would suggest writing a plan, an activity plan, so that you know exactly what you're going to do in a year. Well, not exactly, but you know, this year we're going to focus on building a Twitter audience and a Facebook group and getting our website fit for purpose. And that's a perfectly manageable and achievable plan. And it suggests that you don't have to then do other things as well. And understand how much time and budget that we can therefore put into that. It's also good though to be fleet of foot. You know, these channels, the thing about social media and online that I think is different to maybe traditional marketing is that the channels are changing all the time. And if something's not working, you know, don't worry about it, just move on. Finish it up and move on. If you open up an Instagram channel and you're getting no engagement and it's not working for you, just stop it for a bit and do something else instead. You know, we learn by trial and error. And also because some things are going to work for us better than others. But in saying that, I think you have to be prepared in this sort of work that your workings are going to show sometimes. It's a much more personal view. Sometimes your own voice is much more present than it might have been in traditional marketing channels. You know, if you're sharing pictures of the sunset where you are, you might want to say, this is my picture and I work in this museum, and that's okay. People will see a bit more about who you are in social than they might do understand before. And some initiatives will have a short shelf life. Sometimes you're going to have a flash and in the pan and then it's over, and that's part of the nature of it. So this slide is basically about me telling you 2 things. It's about saying, have a plan. It could be a small plan, but have a manageable plan. And the second one is, it's okay not to do it all. And that's my sort of the key message. I've done a very little outline of this is how you might create a plan. So you might just look at your various channels. The W I've put there is for WordPress, but I mean web, and the envelopes is for e-marketing. So I've got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, website e-marketing. And you might just think, well, what's my objective for Facebook this year? What's my strategy? How am I going to do that? And who's the target audience? And having a tool like this where you can collect it on one sheet and keep it quite simple is a really effective way of just feeling like you've got a bit of control over your social media. One of the things I think that has most problems is that people just feel that it's out of their control, that they don't really have control over it. And I think a simple tool like this can help you to feel like you've got a bit of control over what you're doing. I said I was going to talk about evaluation and analytics, and I'm going to do that really briefly now. So all of these channels, in fact, have got what we call native tools. So that is tools within the channel that you can use to monitor how well they work. So for example, in Twitter, when you make a tweet, you can go onto it afterwards and there's a little thing you can press, the three dots, and it will show you things like the reach of the tweet, etc. And there's other places on Twitter where you can go and look at how successful individual posts or tweets have been. So you've got lots of tools actually within the channels that show you how successful they are. And what I would suggest is that you keep it simple and you have to choose meaningful measures. So if you just want to know how many people are things on Twitter, you might want to say is how many people are sharing it, how many people are retweeting it, how many people are commenting on it. You know, keep it simple. That's one of the things I find that with all of these channels and the evaluations they give you is they give you huge amounts of data. And especially with Google Analytics, you know, you could spend a year just wading in your website data and looking at it. And so my real key advice to you is keep it simple and choose a meaningful measure. What matters to you? So in the first instance, it might just be how many people visit the website in the course of a month. And they provide you on Google Analytics with a really interesting sort of graph, so you can see where people are on, how many people have visited the website over time. And you could just have your meaningful measures just to see if that keeps on going up, you know. So keep it simple. Facebook and Instagram, they have a single, they're part of the same, so you can find Facebook and Instagram monitoring together. I think it's quite tricky, the Facebook monitoring, so I suggest you put down, give yourself half a day to have a proper look at it and see what it's worth, what it tells you. But you know, what are you really monitoring on there? Basically just the number of people who are engaging with you, and you might want to monitor individual posts to see how useful they are. One of the things that I found useful working with a museum before is over time I classified their posts for the past year, and they have a certain types of posts that they make. So they make some posts that are about sales in the coffee shop, the shop, and maybe for special exhibitions. They have some posts that were driving, that were giving out news. They had some posts that were driving interactivity. So you can classify what sorts of posts you're making and then just review those over time. On your e-marketing, you can, it's really helpful, I think, to monitor your growth of your mailing list over time, which you can do. So one of your strategy targets might just be to grow it from 500 people to 700 people in the next year. That could be something that's worth monitoring. It's really useful to monitor opens, and you're only going to know how successful your individual e-marketing campaigns are if you monitor yours over time. We often look for benchmarks, but I don't think there's useful benchmarks for this. So you need to benchmark against yourself. So opens is how many people have opened your e-marketing. Some of that is governed. Obviously, people are more likely to open it if it's got a compelling subject line. So getting the subject line right on your e-marketing is often really useful. So the things I'd monitor on that are how many times has it been opened, and also how many times have people clicked through to the links. So when you're embedding links in your e-marketing, maybe to your website, you want to see, well, is that appealing? Are people actually clicking from what I've written into the website? So that's something to monitor. And as I said on the last slide, you can ask your web designer to set up Google Analytics, and I think work with your team to identify what is going to be a really useful measure to you on the Google Analytics, and then don't worry about the huge amount of data that is there. Worry about the 2 or 3 things that you want to know and just monitor those over time. So likely to be website visits, you know, and you can, the other thing that's really useful if your Google Analytics is set up correctly is you can monitor where people come into your website and where they go out of your website. So that can help you identify, for example, pages that aren't working very well. A page where everybody leaves, maybe because there's not a call to action at the bottom of the page, or you know, they can't find the right links. So it can be useful for that as well. So my tips on metrics are use the native tools for your social media where they are there. Keep it simple and just choose those meaningful measures. And you can monitor the individual posts and behavior over time. So, you know, people might respond to something straight away, but over time you might find that there's a bit of a snowball effect that you can have a look at. I think that takes us to the questions, Jack. I think I've got 10 minutes for questions now.